You look great today. How are you doing?
I am. I'm currently under the pile of allergies that appear to have exploded around the Denver area. Yesterday morning, woke up and was like, just the whole thing, just descended into my face, and that was that.
I saw a friend on Twitter who called in to work for P&D. I was like, what's P&D? And like all these people knew what it was. And I was like, what the hell is that? And they're like, you don't know what that is? I'm like, I'm asking, so no, I don't know what that is. Welcome to 2 Shots and a Realty Check, Quickshots. Brought to you by Venmo, your money, your move, and Liquid Death. Murder your thirst. Now let's quickly get back into it. Post-nasal drip.
That's a thing you can call into wealth. I'm my own boss. So
that's what I was like. I was like, my Gen X fucking neck went up. I was like, what?
Your collar like that dinosaur in Jurassic Park, like...
Take in a roll of toilet paper and suck it up, kid.
I didn't know I could call into work for that. Well, I can't because I'm my own boss. So I guess my boss is a real fucking hard ass prick. So he's a real cocksucker.
Right. Yeah, real cocksucker. Speaking of which, she's pointing at us. Hey, let's do a music thing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Kelsey's very excited about today because we're doing. We're getting into something. So I think we mentioned on a previous podcast about the Living Wage for Musicians Act.
Yes.
And I dismissed it right the fuck out of hand. I was like, this is dead on arrival. Yeah. It's not going to happen. Yeah. Streamers don't pay artists. All of that is still true.
You mentioned not getting Taylor Swift's address or checking account number as well. I remember that.
Yes, but there is some gray area to that. So I have some more information. I think we should get into it a little bit. So we're going to do this just for our music people and do it as a quick shot. And let's just dive into it. So I want to set this up of like what it is and who's behind it and why. So this is a House bill that's been introduced. And it's a House bill that's been introduced by... It is the representative Rashida Tlaib and Jamaal Bowman. Those two representatives are co-sponsors of the bill. But it actually was developed by United Musicians and Allied Workers, which is supposedly kind of
musicians union kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. No real numbers on how many people are in that union. A little bit of research shows that was started in 2020 kind of as a pushback against COVID and fighting for rights around COVID. And for musicians, they've done a lot of things with like fair pay and trying to make things better for musicians, basically. And tying that into other unions to like get union power around it. I don't know how many members there are. I do know they have about 16.5 million followers or 16,500 followers on Twitter. They have a little bit. We're going to give you the link to the site for what we're about to talk to you today is about Make Streaming Pay, which is the weareumaw.org. But we'll give you all of those things in the descriptions and all the links and all that as we talk about this. But they basically have this like add your name to this act and tell your congressperson. They're trying to make musicians stand up for this if we want it. And I will say, unlike most things that are like change.org and stuff, if you've ever seen one of those, it's like, we need 20,000 signatures and there's like 14 people that have signed up. In this case, they're going for something like 25,600 and there are already 14,000 signatures on it.
All right.
So, okay, it's moving a little bit. This is a little bit more than just sort of a pie-in-the-sky scheme, I think, and that's why I wanted to take a little time to talk about it, because, look, this is the way the Music Modernization Act happened, too. Everyone was like, yeah, that's not going to happen. There's no way this gets through Congress, and by the way, it did. And now it is the law of the land, and, Orrin Hatch and Good Latte got involved in it, and it became a huge thing in the Senate, and... So we got to spend a little bit of time. Now we have more information on it. Basically what this is creating a new royalty for recording on streaming. It doesn't specify it, but it does mean on-demand streaming. So take Pandora and SiriusXM and iHeartRadio out of it.
That's passive, right?
Even though that's not what it says. It's non-interactive, Interactive is when you choose to stream something. And basically it's creating a new royalty out of that is paid directly to the artists instead of the label.
Okay.
So this is the recording royalty that we're talking about. A stream, we've talked about this on the podcast before, but a stream and how that counts as a sale is basically the recording royalty, sometimes also called distribution. When you go to their website, there's a whole lot of, music workers create the enormous wealth that streaming platforms accumulate for their CEOs and investors. It is so liberal communist manifesto. But the artists continue to be underpaid, misled, and otherwise exploited by streaming platforms. Well, okay. Some, yeah. But tell that to plenty of people that are making good money on streaming, but okay, whatever. So it's basically all the profits are going to those nasty CEOs and the majors, and independents can't make any money. And that's what this is trying to solve. And the idea is that it would introduce a 1 cent per stream royalty that gets paid directly to artists. Okay, that is the short version. I poo-pooed it and said streamers don't pay artists because they don't. They pay royalty rights holders. In this case, the master owner of the recording. I know we're not using that word anymore, but that's what it is. And so I looked at the bill. It's a 13-page bill. And I wanted to get a really deep understanding of exactly how they're going to do this. This is in the 118th Congress. It doesn't even have a number yet, but it's been introduced into the House. And it is the Living Wage for Musicians Act of 2024. And you can look up the bill yourself. We'll also have a link to it wherever you are listening to this. And so here's the difference. It is not requiring the streamers to pay to musicians. What it basically is doing is starting a new nonprofit organization akin to Sound Exchange, where the streamers will pay into this organization, which is a nonprofit, and then that organization will pay directly to the artists of that royalty pool, directly accounted for by your number of streams. 1 cent per stream is the idea of it. So that's how it's kind of set up to work. Now, let's get into the specifics of it, of like why this is kind of like, we'll see how it's kind of a little bit disingenuous on how this works, because Sound Exchange is good. But if you think that this is going to make you some money, this Living Wage for Musicians Act, I would ask many of you to tell me if you were signed up with Sound Exchange. Yeah. Because you need to be signed up with Sound Exchange to get that money. Sound Exchange basically has collected for a royalty that was not being dealt with in streaming, and that is non-interactive royalties like on Pandora, Sirius XM. Satellite royalty ratings, okay? So this basically doesn't fill a gap that isn't there. There are sound recording royalties being paid. They're just not being paid directly to the artists. And a lot of times if you have a record deal, you're only getting, 15 to 50% of that royalty, depending on what your label deal is. So by setting up this extra little step, that would take the labels out of it. Those nasty labels, that's basically what they're saying. Okay, great. So how does it work? So now we know who's involved. So there are those two Congress people who are behind it, as well as, I will say that this week, some co-sponsors joined the bill. Okay. Representative Delia Ramirez from Illinois, District 3. Representative AOC. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez from New York's 14th. Gotcha. And also Representative Bernie Thompson from Mississippi. Bernie Thompson is a fairly powerful House member, serves on a few committees. So does AOC, by the way. So there are now, it's picking up a little bit more steam, as they say. A little bit more
visibility.
Yeah. Okay. So we know what it is. We know what it's meant to do. How the fuck are they going to get 1 cent out of a dead turnip, basically? So we all know that a stream basically at the end of the day basically pays roughly between 0.003 and 0.005 cent per stream. However, in almost all of the cases, we also know that not every stream gets paid, right? So sometimes in Spotify, when there is a period where there is a freebie period of 3 months, you may not get paid for all those streams. Apple changed that because of Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift said, fuck you, I'm holding out $19.89 until you pay me for every stream you use, even on your free tier. I'm not sure if Spotify has gone that way, but for a while, if you just use it in an ad or whatever, you wouldn't get paid for it. We also know that Spotify Radio pays a less amount for streaming. In some cases, none. You have to opt into it. Okay. So this is going after. So who is it going after? It's going after Spotify, Apple, Amazon, YouTube. Okay, and that's who they're really going after. However, there are 150 streamers worldwide. My music's on 127 of them. I know that for a fact. There are a whole bunch of streamers that you would never realize unless you're really into this, but like my music is played on Tencent and on QQ, and that is in China. And, you know, there are a lot of people whose music is played exclusively on streaming on Beatport. For some of our friends out there who do DJ music and EDM, that's where the world is. It's in Beatport. It ain't on Spotify. People don't listen to that shit on Apple. You may be surprised to understand that Shazam is a streamer, right? Because you are picking a song. Now it's integrated with Apple now. And when you get your reports from Apple, you'll see how many Shazams you have. But technically, that's a play. You know, there's Google Play Music, you know, all of that, Tidal, Deezer, Amazon, like we said, Pandora, but that doesn't really count. However, Bandcamp has a streaming thing. Is that a DSP? Not really sure. Does this bill specify that this is only an American thing, right? So how do you force a streamer to pay that 1 cent to this nonprofit organization if they're not a U.S. company? Well, guess what? Spotify isn't a U.S. company. I mean, they're the biggest, but they're not a U.S. company. Okay, so how do we get that 1 cent? Well, here's how they're doing it. We finally got some numbers and how they're trying to do it. You're going to love this. It comes from adding an extra royalty fee to the user. So you're a user of Spotify and you pay $10.99 a month. You used to pay $9.99 a month. Now you pay $10.99 a month for a single premium subscription. This would add 50% of the subscription cost and 10% of non-subscription revenues like those from ads on Spotify or YouTube or whatever. So say you're using Spotify as a single premium user and you pay $10.99. Well, if you added 50% to that, tomorrow you will owe Spotify $16.49 a month.
That's a big jump.
50%
that's
jump.
a big jump.
And so what do you think most people are going to do?
Jump off the platform.
There's no terms. You're not signing a contract. It's month to month. And so you'll just jump off the platform. Now, what will happen, normally when this pricing stuff happens, there's a big argument in streaming that YouTube, Apple, and Google use music as a loss leader, meaning they can maintain the lowest price possible because they don't give a fuck whether they make money on the subscription or not, is to get you into their ecosystem to buy the $1,000 phone, to spend $200 a year on Amazon Prime, to whatever it is, to use Google search. So they can keep that low. But once it goes up a little bit and someone wants to choose away from Apple because of a price, well, where would they go? They would go to Spotify and use it for free, ad supported, or go to YouTube and use it for free, ad supported. We all know that advertising revenues are down. So, you know, and look, Spotify doesn't make a profit. Most of these other companies don't make a profit on music either. That's partially because of the input and the output. And so it's very likely if they lost, I don't know, 20, 30% of their subscriber base that they would have to fold. And it's not because Spotify doesn't love you or love music or because Apple doesn't love you or love music. It's because Spotify has investors and hedge funds and people that need to make the money on the stock price, and they would force them to probably fold. That's an issue. And also, major labels own part of Spotify. So that's a problem. Now, okay, so that's where the money comes from. So this 50% that would get added onto all these subscription levels. Whew. Now, imagine if you're on Tidal. Tidal costs $20 a month. Well, now you're paying $30 a month. Half of 20 is 10 plus 20 is 30. Holy shit. Is anybody going to stay on Tidal for $30 a month? I don't think so. I also think that there's also like a little rule built into this bill that is 50% of subscription revenue is this fee. They also get 10% of non-subscription revenue, which is the ads and all of that, right? Not to be more than $10 is what the bill says, and not less than $4. Okay. So, whatever that number is, it can't be more or less than that. Now, here's what's interesting. I don't think of a lot of people. Well, I mean, our people probably know this, but Spotify and Apple are everywhere in the world. So if you just take that $5, right, not to be more than $4, let's say, in Colombia, the actual Spotify single premium costs $4.19, $4.13. If you're in India, it costs $1.44.
Yeah. Okay,
so how do you do that? Basically, this would mean that right now, the only ones that they could do this to would be ones that charge $8, right? Add the 15% of the subscription revenue. Well, that would be someone in Canada who pays $8.11 for Spotify. And now they would pay $12. Yeah. But, I mean, imagine that if you're in Vietnam and you pay $2.44 and now you're going to be paying $1.25 more. Yeah, that doesn't look good. How are you going to force that? By the way,
is
you're going to make the DSP?
Is there anything in the bill that addresses any of these concerns, especially with regards to how the forcing of how are you going to force people to pay into this fund? How are especially people outside of the United States, which is most of them, and what is going to how are they going to not have these things just go, well, fuck you, we're folding and getting out of here. Go fuck yourself and your stupid bill. What's to stop them from doing that? Nothing.
It just says penalty.
5 minutes for fighting.
Section 5, which is on page 7, 14, line 14. Section 5, enforcement. The fund administrator may establish by regulation penalties for a violation of a prohibition under this act by a service provider or a failure to comply with a requirement under this act by a service provider. That's it. Now, this is one of the shortest bills I've ever seen. Like I said, it's 13 pages.
That was surprisingly short.
Yeah, the MMA ended up, by the time it was passed, I think over 99 pages. There is a lot to be worked out in House markup on how whatever we're talking about today is not going to be probably what the bill ends up, because the enforcement and now you can't, like I said before, you can't just say, well, this is just for American companies. Yeah. That's a fine. When Spotify is based somewhere else. But now take it the other way. Like in the United States, Spotify is $10.99. In Switzerland, Spotify is $16.24.
Don't they also have socialized healthcare?
Add $8 to that. Now the Swiss they may be neutral, but they may go to war over that shit. You know what I mean?
They'll fight us over chocolate. Yeah.
And in the UK, I think the UK averages $14.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing. Okay, so that's one issue that I don't know whether you can get over, right? Yeah. I get that the intention behind it is we need to force them to raise their subscriptions, but if we do, I think that's the idea behind this, right? Is that there's a lot of people in the ether that look at streaming and go, well, if there's not enough money, then just charge more money. Okay. On the one side, I agree with that. Music is worth more than Steve Jobs set it at. When he set a single at 99 cents and an album at $10, and therefore it ever was. For the most part. It did go to $2.49, but for the most part, that's what the idea was. Let's just leave it at that. No cost of living increase, no inflation, and how much the input of music costs more, blah, 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 right? And so that's always been a fucking, like, fuck you, Steve Jobs, for that. I know I've said that on this before, but I still agree with that. And while that may be better than piracy, it's also killed a lot of musicians and artists. Not literally. Well, maybe. I don't know. But so that's the problem, is that a lot of people go, oh, well, there just needs to be more money in it. Not understanding, well, because we have screwed this pooch so hard, there are a lot of consumers that are just basically like, no, I'm not paying more than this much.
Wasn't that even
And the internal work of Spotify has shown that if, like, for every dollar that they go up, like, I think they did lose about 10%.
Yeah, when that happened 15%. Last year, right? That they went up by $1 last year, and they lost. Yeah. So this is gonna,
and so you will lose subscribers, and because there is a freemium tier, meaning you have it for free, but you just listen to more ads. That's also a pain point, because it's meant to make you hate it, right? It's meant to make you get frustrated and go, shit, I just as well pay. I'm so sick of hearing these ads.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is for you and I.
And so imagine if more people go into that pool, there's going to be so many more ads. Also, there's a whole lot of Spotify that is revenue-based now. Audiobooks. Comedy, podcasts, video. Same thing with Apple TV. Apple has this part of Apple Music, which is video. Dolby Atmos, which pays more, it costs more, all of this. That ad subscription revenue, this whole 10% of your extra revenue that isn't subscription, like, okay, I don't know if we should be getting podcast ad money.
Well, it also means that,
like, Spotify isn't a pure music streamer.
Yeah. Neither's Apple anymore. I mean, you've got their podcast app.
Neither is Apple.
Every major podcast has a premium subscription for, whatever, $8, $9 a month, where you can cut the ads out. So it's still doing. Right. I mean, but at some point in time, does Apple offer a freemium platform? Because, like, and you're going to hear more ads if this goes, because they have to. If we're going to increase the ad revenue, to this other fund, we have to increase the number of ads we run to maintain our profit margin.
Yeah. And let's say there's a streaming company that's being developed right now to fix this problem for musicians. Let's say that streaming company has a business model that is more in line with paying rights holders and musicians and providing more revenue for them. Yeah. Well, this would absolutely deter the marketplace. Like, I don't know if I would join, knowing that whatever you come up with in your business plan, it's going to have to be 50% more to pay this, essentially, tax. Yeah. It's a tax. That's what it is. It's a tax that is collected by a government entity, a nonprofit, a government prescribed entity that is a nonprofit. And by the way, Sound Exchange leaves on the table about 4 to 6% for administration. So not all of the money goes into there. And let's dig into this. Okay, so how this actually works. If you've ever been around Sound Exchange shit, it pays featured and non-featured artists. And what that means is, like, let's say you have a band and the band is the featured artist, but you had, like, a bass player come in and play on a track. That's a non-featured artist, session musician, whatever. That can be prescribed by you. It can be described in your... You have to go on Sound Exchange and decide who is the featured artist, who's the non-featured artist. That also has a side to it that is like the producer and mixer within Sound Exchange. And if all this sounds confusing to you, you should know it's confusing to everyone that deals with Sound Exchange.
Yeah.
Because what happens with all of my streaming money if I didn't sign up for Sound Exchange? Well, it's supposed to go into a black box, and then when I eventually do sign up, I'm supposed to get it. Well, we did that. I've done it with multiple artists. It doesn't go to you. And in fact, there are a lot of labels who have put claims on them. I was fighting with Warner for 6 months over something where a guy hadn't even signed a deal with Warner, but Warner claimed it.
I was fighting with somebody in Canada for a while over ownership of a song that I wrote by myself and recorded by myself.
Some distributor, Tune Groove or something, right?
Yeah.
Or Groove
Tunes,
like And this happens all the time on Sound Exchange. And I will also explain to you this. So as Pollyanna as this sounds, and it is a little bit.
Yeah.
I will say, just like everything else that's happened that is pro-musician in the music world, and that is like you get to self-distribute your music. Yay! You can gather all your royalties yourself. No more middlemen. Oh, boo, I don't like middlemen, right? Get these money people out of my way. Guess what happens? You spend 30 more fucking hours a week trying to figure it out. It adds to your workload. If you don't get on Sound Exchange, if you don't get on your distributor, if you don't do an audit, if you don't list your songs, if you don't get on your PRO, it becomes nearly impossible to hire a team to do some of this because, again, if it's going to pay the artist directly and I want to be your agent to pay you, how do I get paid? Like, I don't get a little piece of that. Even if you wanted to hire a team to do it, it becomes an issue. Okay, so, but in this case, I will say this is different than what I thought, where they were going to make Spotify paid Beyonce directly and have Beyonce's bank account. No. But Beyonce does have to sign up for this new Sound Exchange-like thing. And she has to go in, or her people has to go in and claim all of her music again. And claim
for the 12,000th time.
Okay, so let's get into, so you can see the problems.
Yeah.
The money, what it would do to consumers, probably not good. Might be more fair for us that consumers should pay closer to $20 to $30 a month for all of the world's music. Might be fairer to us. I do like the idea that it carves it out, takes the DSPs out of it and says, you send that money to a nonprofit and then we send it directly to the people. Okay. I do like that because it doesn't go to a label and they take their cut. I get that. However, we just saw this week that Universal Music Group is now getting direct payments from Sound Exchange for Pandora. Breaking the veil. Yeah. That's a whole nother conversation. Okay. But all of that. So you can see how the pricing is a problem.
Yeah.
But the good news is that, it would go direct if you sign up, if you put the work in, if you claim the song correctly, if the song is listed correctly from the DSP, blah, 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 right? Now, here's how the money works. This is the math, if you want to for lack of a better word. There is a cap on this 1 cent per stream. So what happens when Bruno Mars has 25 million streams?
Yeah.
That's a fuckload of money if you add a 1 cent on that. Now, for you and I, if we're looking at 20,000 or 100,000 streams, okay, that's awesome. Now we're looking at making some money. Some money would be nice, right? However, there is an equivalent cap to it, and this only pays the 1 cent per stream up to 1 million streams on one track per month. So say you're blowing up.
Yeah.
You finally are blowing up and you're getting 3 million streams on a song or 2 million streams. You hit a playlist. Ka-ching! That's fantastic. Yeah. Ooh. Nope, not for the Living Wage Act. It's going to cap it at 1 million, which means you will only get roughly about $10,000 for 1 million streams from the Living Wage Act. Now that's good because the normal payment is about $1,700. That's how much you normally would make. Although I dispute that as well. That's like 0.0017 instead of 0.003. So it should be closer to, I think, what was it? It's $2,000, something like that. But let's say you have 1 million streams at, I always use 4, but whatever it is. If you say it's 3, okay. If it's 0.003, that's $3,000 for 1 million streams. Okay, so that means that your total payout for that month for 1 million streams of one track with this new act in place, instead of it being $3,000, it would now be, oh my goodness, $13,000 a month. Okay, shit. We're on to something now. This is how they're trying to get artists into this, right? By the way, on the website, when you look for it in this description, that the United whatever they're called, UMAW. I'm sorry. United Music, whatever. Yeah, musicians and allied workers. It's the allied workers part that it makes it sound like they're pipe fitters or something. I don't know.
Pipe layers.
But they have like a little, you can see how much a stream is going to be worth in all of this. So, like, let's say that you have a few songs out, and you have 20,000 listeners. Each one of those listeners listens to 2 or 3 songs this month from yours, and you get, let's say, 50,000 streams. Well, it's saying that you're going to make 500 from the Living Wage Act, plus your 86 or $100 from the regular stuff. So you'd make about $600 this month off of those songs. Yeah. Okay, now we're talking about a living. That's all right. If it works that way, right? Now, here's the thing. What happens to all that money over 1 million streams? Beyonce, Bruno Mars, Taylor Swift. Basically, all the huge artists, they get way more than 1 million streams per month on every song. Shit, there's some 80s bands that get more than 1 million streams every month on one song. Well, now here's where the communism comes in. We take all that money and we put it in a pot, and then we distribute it to all of the musicians on this new nonprofit based on their streams. Okay, this bill says nothing about how that's done. If I have a catalog of 300 songs or if I have a catalog of 2 songs, how does that money get distributed? Yeah. Are you confused yet?
And it's only 13 pages.
What questions do you have, musicians, Stu?
Well, I have a series of questions.
Well, sir, I just want to make a living.
But I also believe that this is only part of a living from streaming. I think it's part. I don't think that it's the only piece. And I think that this bill is trying to is confusing that fact, I think, a little bit, which is, as a musician, your sole source of income is not just your streaming. It's also performing live. It's also, like just being a creative person. It can be being a featured artist on somebody else's track. It can be a variety of different ways. If you're an instrumentalist, well, fuck, go out there and become a session musician. There are 1,000 other avenues for you to go and follow your joy here. Streaming is not the only one, and publishing. Now, when it comes to like the idea of passive residual income, by the way, it's not passive, but residual income for your, songwriting and this, and you never know, like something might get a bump in the future and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, this is a great place to start. But if you really want to play the game of streaming and building your catalog, and also, it's a whole fuckload of other stuff, and I don't think this bill takes into account that.
Yeah, I will say that their words do make it clear, like this won't fix everything, but this is trying to fix the on-demand streaming portion of this. Hot
take coming in.
The hot take started out with like, this is dead on arrival, it ain't going nowhere, you don't need to pay attention to it. I think in this kind of world where there are so many people who are pro-protest and, this kind of language of like, where like fans no music fan wants to give their money to tech CEOs. People pay for a streaming service because they love the bands.
Sorry, that was my face during that.
That kind of language. Yeah, that kind of language is, I don't know, it's going to get a lot of people. And I mean, this is going to get some of the people who are in the crypto space too, about like, oh, well, this may be a kind of a bridge of like where we can kind of extract more out of streaming and that sort of thing. So look, so now it's turned from I don't think this will ever happen to I'm kind of afraid that it's gaining steam. It has co-sponsors. It has a little bit of celebrity behind it. I mean, you're just like really a few bands away from making this really go. Yeah. Like if Eddie Vedder jumps in or, a few people that are like that jump in and be like, you know what? This is a good idea. Let's force the streamers to charge more.
When do some of the music business people start? The thing is, I understand that the mouthpiece is like the artists who may not understand all of the ins and outs of this particular streaming adventure and how royalties are calculated there and this, that, and the other thing, and what is actually being paid to rights holders and as we go forward. I understand that there's going to be that might push it into more of a publicly acceptable place. But besides you, is anybody out there saying, "Hey guys, there's a series of problems in this that it does not address because you guys really don't know what you're talking about when it comes to this side of the music industry"?
I've seen some of the writing on it come to the same conclusion, that this is a long way from being viable, that it's probably not going to go anywhere, but the ideals behind it are good.
Yeah.
I've seen very few people break it down like we're doing today. Like actually get into the bill, actually get into where the problems in the bill are. And also, you know, I have a little bit of experience in the political arena with this, of knowing this bill will get marked up. It will be changed. It has to go through a budgetary process, because to set up this new sound exchange-like thing is going to be millions and millions of dollars. And they will have to hire a CEO and a board, and like we're way far away from the day that this goes live, probably 2 years, but that doesn't mean it may not pass. Yeah. And I will say that there are plenty of areas where Republicans agree with Democrats on this.
Whoa. Yeah.
Where, I mean, look, understand a lot of the MMA came from Republicans. It was signed under Trump.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because they see that as like sort of a way to get some of their, you know, constituents into this. But I mean, Marsha Blackburn, she's from Tennessee. That chick is crazy as batshit. But she was down for MMA.
Yeah. And we're not talking about...
Same thing with Orrin Hatch. Orrin Hatch is a gentrologist. I mean, he's 80 years old when he was doing this.
To be clear, we're not talking about...
Fuck does he know about
We're not talking about mixed martial arts here. Hey, question for you. Would you want the CEO job of this new endeavor if it were to come to fruition? Why not?
Because I've seen what it's done to the people in Sound Exchange. Like that's part of the problem. Part of the problem is that like I loved the idea of Sound Exchange, and I supported it from the very beginning. Michael Hupp is the president and CEO of Sound Exchange, and I interviewed him a few times. We had a few conversations, and it's doing the Lord's work. But like, honestly, my biggest problem with all of this is what we started with, is that this creates more work for artists. And anyone that's tried to navigate the MLC knows how much work it creates. And like, it is the only way to do it, where you have to do a match of the music that's out there, because we're already in a shitty system, and they're trying to like tack things on as Band-Aids, and it just makes more work for you. And I wish there was a way where it was more service oriented. Yeah. You know, like if I could create it, I would. Yeah. If I could help design it, I would. But the thing is that I wouldn't create it to only be like, I think the problem with all of these things is they exist as single use. Like it's only for this thing. I would use it as an archive service too. I would use it as a way to serve the musicians. If you got to come to my site and claim your music, well, let's make it do something a little bit more. Let's also make it go to your PRO. If I've already claimed it, then can't we make sure it's completely registered correctly with PRO? Can't we make sure it's the ISRC is correct? Can't we make sure that like I'm going to get an audit from the streamer about it? Now, that may be a part of this, because the bill does stipulate that this new entity will be able to audit the DSPs for stream counts.
Oh, gotcha.
Now, that's a problem. I mean, that's, if I'm Spotify, and I know some of the people that would be doing that, look, they don't want to answer that. Like what you're seeing in your back end as artist Spotify dashboard is not what your streams are. It just isn't. It just isn't. It may be at a certain level, but like when you get up into the millions and all of that, there isn't a real number. Now, we've talked about this before, but YouTube in this is a fucking mess. How much of the ad revenue is going towards music that they're going to take the 10% of?
Oh, interesting.
Like, it doesn't make any sense in that category because you're getting paid on the music that isn't used as a music video, YouTube Red music, whatever that fucking thing is over there. And what if it's your own? Okay, so what if you're running your own YouTube music channel and that music, that ad revenue that comes to you as the channel owner, and then you have the performance money going to you as the musician, and then you got to pay 10% out, or YouTube has to pay it. Well, they're going to take it from the channel owner, which may be you, the musician. It's just, like, that part just, there's so many like landmines with how they are describing what non-subscription revenue is. That is an issue with me on this. So, yeah, I got to say that my fear is that this is going to gain steam because it's simple to understand 1 cent per stream. It's simple to do this little calculator of like, oh, I could make a lot more money as a musician. It's not simple to force Beatport to charge their people more, even though you're really going after Spotify. And I foresee, if this goes far enough, a company like Amazon going, fuck it, I'm out. Drop Amazon Music. Apple won't, Spotify won't.
But you're going to see a lot of...
But Spotify could be forced to.
Spotify can't be forced to. They're not a U.S. company.
But I mean, their shareholders.
Yeah, that's fair.
Their shareholders and the equity and a lot of the hedge fund people would be like, hey, we've juiced this. We've made it. And the damn American congressperson like screwed it up for everyone, and so shut the doors. Which, by the way, I know that people don't think that can happen, but I will remind you that something like 20 million tracks were lost from MySpace when MySpace just had to shut down.
Yeah.
So you think there is a world that doesn't exist, or a world can't exist without Spotify, and I'm telling you it can. Yeah. And it would happen with a swiftness. And the other thing that goes on this is that we're seeing a lot of this fight back from Spotify over what a real stream is, right? There's a guy who had 25 million streams, woke up one day and TuneCore had sent him a letter. Hey, we did an audit and these aren't real. And we're going to go ahead and take down all of your tracks. Ben Jordan, I think is his name. And we're going to go ahead and take down all your tracks.
Wow.
And for even the amount of time that all his tracks were down, like, even though they put it back up, you lose followers, you lose subscribers, you lose real stream money. Probably, I think he said he lost something like $25,000 just in fighting it, just in not having those tracks available. And so, what happens when Spotify starts saying that those 1,000 tracks we're not paying a royalty to? Or, they're saying 1,000 streams is not a real artist till you get over 1,000 streams a month. Do those count for this? Yeah. What happens if Spotify says, oh, well, now you're juicing the system and you're using playlist bots or whatever, but the Living Wage for Musicians Act is paying you a cent per, but Spotify isn't paying you. How does that work? What happens if I spend $500 a day on putting my song on a YouTube ad? YouTube pays the 10%, but I'm getting the streams, which is basically a 30-second listen without a skip. Yeah. It is a listen. It is a stream. And how does it work? Like, and this is why I think it's such a simple bill, because they don't know these things, or maybe they're just going to wait until we all argue about it. But I will tell you another reason why I wanted to talk to you about this today. When I was against the Music Modernization Act, oh my God, suddenly some big name songwriters, some big name artists showed up in front of Congress. That moves the fucking needle. And that's the next step in this. Is there will be a public hearing at some point. And so, look, it's not up for a vote yet. It's just been introduced into the House. So we're way far away from it. But I do think it might gain steam because people hate Spotify so much. Yeah.
It's also there's a degree of it which is this isn't fair. It's not fair. Kind of a tantrum a little bit, You know,
Yeah.
Because we've talked about this. It's not fair, and nor will this make it fair.
No.
So, you know, and you know, is it fair that Taylor Swift has the success that she has, and somebody else who may be just as qualified a songwriter and performer doesn't? No, but
no. It's I mean, I think it kind of, if you want to get into the real deep side of this, and I'll just say it very quickly, I think this breaks the Commerce Clause. I don't think that you can force a private company to do this. The Sound Exchange was actually created to fill a gap of a royalty that was already prescribed by law, but not being paid and couldn't be paid to anywhere. This is double dipping on recording royalties. That's what it is. It's double dipping. It's taking one that Spotify says, we've made this agreement. This is what we're paying.
And everybody said yes.
And then Congress coming in and going, okay, add 50% to that. And by the way, send it to us. And that's an issue. And, you know, I think that it may break the Commerce Clause and that it's a problem for a lot of like constitutional problems. But fucking A, who knows? I mean, the Department of Justice and Merrick Garland just filed a lawsuit against Apple for unfair practices. And all you need to do is Google EU Apple 1.8 billion to see what's happening in the EU against Apple. Again, this is over subscription things, right? Like, so if Spotify got out of this, but if you get Deezer on Apple, if you download that app and you decide to pay a subscription through that, there's a 30% VIG on that shit that Apple gets. So Deezer charges you 30% more plus the taxes. Well, wait a minute, but doesn't Apple get 30% of that too? And how much of that would be the 10% of the subscription, would be the 50% of the subscription revenue if it's going through an app? So, but the thing is that, look, the Biden administration and Congress is very much against kind of how big tech is running a lot of this shit. And it's in the air. And so we felt that you guys should know about it. You can learn more about it on your own by clicking on any one of these links. And if you have any questions, you can send them to us, 2ShotsMusicPod@gmail.com. And by the way, you can check out all of our other podcasts, 2ShotsMusicPod.com, and anywhere you get your damn podcasts as well as YouTube. But we'll go ahead and wrap this sucker up.
That was a lot of really fucking great information. Thank you for reading the bill.
Yeah, good luck. Read the bill, fall asleep, have a drink, and go, God, wouldn't that be nice if I made more money? Yeah. More money. More money. All right, y'all. Go write a great song. Talk to you soon. Bye.